Welcome to BlackFiles TV. This channel is dedicated to the examination of real criminal cases, not through myth, exaggeration, or spectacle, but through evidence, historical context, and critical analysis. Here, we do not glorify violence. We do not romanticize killers. We document what happened. We question what was assumed, and we learn from what was misunderstood. Every case we examine is treated as a file, a record of decisions, failures, blind spots, and consequences. In each episode, we reopen that file. We analyze the facts as they were known at the time. We examine the evidence that guided investigators and the evidence that misled them. We separate what can be proven from what was invented by rumor, media, and fear. This is episode 1. Today, we are examining one of the most infamous criminal investigations in history, the Jack the Ripper case. Not as legend, not as folklore, and not as a symbol of mystery, but as a documented investigation, conducted under pressure, shaped by assumptions, and distorted by the limitations of its era. What did authorities get wrong? Which evidence was unreliable or misunderstood? And why did this case unfold the way it did, allowing myth to eclipse fact for more than a century? Before we begin, if you value evidence over sensationalism and analysis over speculation, like this video and subscribe to BlackFiles TV. New case files are released regularly. And in the comments below, tell us which case you believe deserves to be reopened next. Now, let's open the file. This is BlackFiles TV. Jack the Ripper. In the autumn of 1888, London believed it was hunting a monster. Not simply a criminal, but something darker, something calculated, a brilliant and methodical killer, a man who appeared and disappeared into the fog, leaving fear behind him as his only trace. Newspapers painted him as intelligent, elusive, and untouchable. Police echoed that image, convinced they were facing an extraordinary mind. The public accepted it without question. But what if that image was wrong from the very beginning? What if Jack the Ripper was not a criminal mastermind at all, but the result of investigative misunderstandings, unreliable evidence, and myths that grew faster than facts could ever keep up? This is not the legend of Jack the Ripper. This is the case file, stripped of mythology, exaggeration, and assumptions that hardened into truth simply through repetition. Whitechapel in 1888 was one of the poorest districts in London. It was a place defined by instability. Overcrowded housing forced families and strangers into shared rooms. Common lodging houses kept no permanent records, meaning residents could vanish overnight without documentation. Alcoholism was widespread. Violence was frequent. Street assaults, domestic abuse, and theft were daily occurrences. Police intervention was inconsistent and often superficial. Women lived at the absolute edge of survival. Many had no fixed address, no legal protection, and no social value in the eyes of institutions. When they disappeared, it was rarely treated as urgent. Their absence blended into the background noise of poverty. This context is essential, because from the very beginning, police misunderstood the environment in which the murders occurred. Investigators searched for someone who stood out, someone unusual, someone different. But in Whitechapel, anonymity was the norm. The killer was far more likely an insider, someone who understood the rhythms of the streets, the blind spots, the noise, and the darkness, misunderstanding the killer's intelligence. Victorian police quickly concluded that the killer must be highly intelligent. This belief shaped the entire investigation. The reasoning seemed logical at the time. The killer escaped repeatedly. The crimes escalated in brutality. There were no reliable witnesses. To investigators, this suggested planning and intellect. But modern analysis reveals a different picture. Whitechapel was poorly lit. Gas lamps were unreliable and sparse. Police patrols were undermanned and predictable. Hundreds of people moved through the area every night, creating constant motion and confusion. In such conditions, escaping did not require intelligence. It required familiarity. The killer did not outthink police strategy. He moved within an environment that already concealed him. Police mistook environmental chaos for criminal brilliance, elevating the offender into something more calculated than the evidence supports. Misunderstanding, anatomical skill. The mutilations horrified both the public and authorities. Early medical opinions suggested surgical precision, leading investigators to believe the killer had formal medical training. Yet, even at the time, doctors disagreed. Some noted precision, others observed irregular, rushed cuts that lacked consistency. Modern experts increasingly agree that the wounds could have been inflicted by someone with basic knife experience. Butchers, slaughterhouse workers, or laborers would have possessed sufficient familiarity. The conditions of the crimes must be considered: darkness, time pressure, the constant risk of interruption. Under these conditions, interpretation becomes unreliable. The theory of a skilled surgeon may have been a narrative imposed after the fact, not a conclusion drawn from solid evidence. Unreliable evidence and the letters. During the investigation, hundreds of letters were sent to police and newspapers. Most were hoaxes, yet several were treated as genuine, most notably the Dear Boss and From Hell letters. These communications shaped public perception and police focus. They created a character, a voice, a personality. The name Jack the Ripper did not come from the killer. It came from the press. Police were no longer searching for a man. They were searching for a myth. Resources were diverted. Assumptions were made. Behavioral profiles were constructed on potentially false foundations. Witness testimony and physical evidence. Witness statements were deeply flawed. Accounts conflicted. Descriptions shifted. Fear, rumor, and prejudice influenced memory. Tall or short, local or foreign, well-dressed or shabby. Without photographs, recordings, or standardized interview methods, these statements could not be verified, yet they were heavily relied upon. Physical evidence offered little clarity. There was no DNA, no fingerprints, no blood typing. Clothing stains, knife theories, and graffiti were interpreted through speculation. Some evidence was washed away by rain. Other pieces were lost or never documented. By modern standards, the case file was dangerously thin. How myths distorted the investigation. The media transformed a series of murders into legend. Newspapers competed for attention. Rumors became facts. Speculation hardened into certainty. The killer was portrayed as hyper-intelligent, sadistic, and almost supernatural. This distorted police priorities. Investigators searched for dramatic suspects rather than probable ones. Ordinary individuals were overlooked. Foreigners, Jewish residents, doctors, and upper-class men became targets of suspicion, often driven by prejudice rather than evidence. The myth became louder than the truth. Investigative limitations. Victorian policing faced severe limitations. There was no centralized database. Communication between departments was poor. Political pressure from government and media was constant. Public mistrust hindered cooperation. Officers worked long hours with limited training and resources. Even if the killer had been briefly identified, proving guilt beyond doubt would have been nearly impossible. The system itself was unprepared. Why the case became unsolvable. Jack the Ripper was not one failure, but many combined. Misinterpreted intelligence, unreliable letters, flawed witness testimony, media-driven mythology, lack of forensic science, lost and contaminated evidence. By the time the murders stopped, the trail was already cold. As years passed, evidence degraded. Witnesses died. Records disappeared. The case did not go unsolved because the killer was perfect. It went unsolved because the investigation never had a solid foundation. The real legacy: Jack the Ripper changed history, not because he was extraordinary, but because the system confronting him was inadequate. The legend endured, the truth faded, and the case file remains open, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a lesson. This was not the story of a mastermind. It was the story of an investigation that never stood a chance. This is BlackFiles TV, and this file remains closed. This concludes today's case file. What we examined was not just a series of crimes, but an investigation shaped by pressure, limited tools, and powerful assumptions. The truth was never simply hidden. In many ways, it was buried, beneath fear, media narratives, and the belief that authorities were facing something extraordinary. Some questions remain unanswered. Some conclusions were reached too quickly, and some mistakes would define this case for generations. At BlackFiles TV, we don't aim to provide final answers. We aim to document how truth becomes distorted, and why. Because understanding past failures is often the only way to prevent them from happening again. If you believe evidence matters more than legend, and analysis matters more than speculation, subscribe to BlackFiles TV. New case files are released regularly. Until next time, keep questioning the narrative. This is BlackFiles TV. Do not forget to comment your opinions on this case, and which case should we investigate next. See you on the next episode of Blacklist TV.